Hi there, welcome back. My name is Nicole with morningchores.com. We're so glad to have you on this beautiful spring day. We are knee deep in the planting season here where I live. We are at the end of spring, headed into summer, and I thought today's topic would be perfect because we are going to address direct seed sowing. I'm going to talk about what it is, the benefits of it, and how to do it. So what is direct seed sowing? Direct seed sowing is basically taking the seed that you purchased from a store or you saved from a previous season, and you're planting that seed directly in the soil outside. So this seed is not being started indoors. It's not being started in a greenhouse. You are direct planting it in the soil outside. That seed will then germinate, and then that plant lives the duration of its life outside. Examples of this would be things like peas, green beans, and squash. Whereas something that you start indoors, at least where I live, would be tomatoes and peppers. If I started tomatoes and peppers outside where I live, it would get too cold before that plant would produce any fruit. I know that from experience because in my garden I always get volunteer tomato plants and they grow beautifully, but it gets cold before they produce any tomatoes. So let's talk about some benefits of direct seed sowing. The first benefit is it's so easy. You literally buy the seeds and you plant them in the ground. Yes, you do have to do a little bit of prep work to the soil. You have to make sure it's weed free, and you may need to add in some compost, and you got to mound up the dirt. You know, there's a little bit of prep work, but it really is easy compared to starting seeds indoors. I feel like the seeds you start indoors, you kind of have to babysit a little bit and tend to them a little bit more, whereas this is just very simple. Literally put the seed in the ground, cover with soil, and you're done, and it's just a wait and see game. The second benefit to direct seed sowing is that any level of gardener can do this. So if you've never gardened before, then this is the way to go. It's very simple. You just need to learn what seeds you can direct seed sow. And usually it will tell you on the package, but I'm sure if you do a simple Google search, you can find a list of plants that grow well in your area that you can direct seed sow. But even if you're an advanced gardener, you can always try new or more exotic species of plants and try direct seed sowing with those. So really it's obtainable for any level of gardener. The last benefit of direct seed sowing is it's cheap. You don't really need a lot of fancy equipment or supplies. It doesn't take a big investment up front like a greenhouse does, or when you start your plants indoors, you need a little bit of equipment. With direct seed sowing, it's actually very simple because all you really need are the seeds themselves, which cost maybe a few dollars, give or take on what type of seeds you purchase. And you may need to buy some soil or compost to add to the area in which you want to plant the seeds. But that's really it. A watering can, but you don't even need that. You can just use a pitcher or just a cup that holds water. So you don't need anything fancy to direct seed sow. Now at this point you might be asking, are there any drawbacks to direct seed sowing? And there are a few, but for me personally, it's not enough to deter me away from direct seed sowing. I still do it and I still love it. The first drawback is that it requires more seed. So because we don't have more control over the environment and all the elements that go into direct seed sowing as we do with indoor planting, it does require a little bit more seed. So for example, when you plant carrots, you kind of have to plant a lot more seeds than you would if you were to start them indoors. When we're starting seeds indoors, you know, we have our tray and we have our little pods with our soil, and it's very easy to control how much seed we're putting in each one. And because it's a controlled environment, we have a better germination rate. Whereas outside, you may direct seed sow right into the ground and a week or two may go by and nothing's coming up. So then you have to reseed or replant. So it does require a little more seed, but I think all in all, I still really prefer it over indoor seed starting. And the fact that you're using more seed leads to the next drawback, and that is you usually have to thin out your plants. So for example, when I plant lettuce in the early spring, I usually have to thin some of it out, and that's just what I call microgreens. So when I'm thinning out, I usually will pick every other plant out so that the plants I leave in the ground have more space to grow and get bigger. And I'll just use those little lettuce seedlings as microgreens for a salad. Another example is carrots. Usually when you plant carrots, you plant a row and you lay the seed pretty thick in that little trench. So as they come up, you have to thin them out so that the carrots you leave behind in the soil have room to get bigger. And the last drawback is sometimes direct seed sowing is harder to get the seeds to germinate or get started, and you may have to reseed or replant a few days to a week later if nothing's coming up. Now for me, I really haven't had this issue in my area, and I think it's because I usually wait until the middle of May to do a lot of my direct seed sowing. The only thing I plant super early is lettuce, cabbage, and broccoli, just because those like the cooler weather. But otherwise, some people do struggle with getting their seeds started, and it could just be a soil issue. But don't lose hope, keep trying, because eventually I know you'll get it. Thank you so much for joining me in today's video. I hope you found it helpful. I would love to hear in the comments below, what do you guys like to direct seed sow? Or maybe you prefer indoor seed starting versus direct seed sowing. So let me know in the comments below. Also, I would love for you guys to head over to morningchores.com. You can find so much information over there on sustainable living, on gardening, and so much more. So definitely check that out, and we'll see you on the next video.